Ladies and gentlemen, former Airman First Class, member of the SAC Elite Guard, Mr. Dave Weber.
The last time I was surrounded by so many general officers, they were in a book, and I was studying their faces and their names, trying to memorize them so I wouldn't look like an idiot up on the hilltop. Let me give you a brief, let me just say thank you very much for inviting me today, and a very good day to all of you. I hope you're enjoying the symposium. I feel so inadequate standing up here. I feel like my first day on post, out at Offutt, I do. Hoping that I don't, screw something up. Let me just give you a brief background. Rob said that I grew up in Evanston, and I joined the Air Force out of high school in 1962. I remember wanting to go into the service. I really did, and I wanted to pick the right branch, and so I chose the Air Force, and have never regretted my decision in the least. Of course, we went to San Antonio. We took a train down to San Antonio for basic training, and this isn't really going to be a speech. This is just going to be memories that flashed through my mind over the last, 36 years since I got to Offutt, since I was in the service, 38 years? Oh my God. I can see we're all on the same follicle train, which makes me feel good. Anyway, I got to San Antonio, as we all did, and my dad was so encouraged by me going in the service. We were talking about the Battle of the Bulge, and Dad was there in Germany fighting in the war, and used to tell me stories all the time, and they were just fascinating, and I couldn't think of anything better to do with my life than join the service and serve my country. And when I left, I remember I expected a hug from him or something, and I turned around to get on the train, and he slapped me on the butt and said, "Go get him, Tiger." So I did. I went down there and tried to be the best troop I could, and you all went through basic training. You know what it was like, and we were issued these uniforms that fit us when we started and didn't fit us when we finished. And I got this awful fatigue hat to wear during basic training, and I took it back to the barracks and starched it and ironed it, made it look like a real baseball cap. And we went out, and they were playing Take This Blue from the Skies in a Pretty Girl's Eyes, and I'm standing there at 6 in the morning, inspection, and one of my TIs comes up, the bad one. There was a good one and a bad one. The TI comes up to me and stands in front of me, and I am looking as sharp as you could possibly look. He grabs that hat and pulls it off my head and steps on it, crushes it into the pavement and says, "Who the hell you think you are, Mickey Mantle?" I said, I didn't know what to say. I was trying to do the best I could, but I was separating myself from the rest of the troops, and wasn't supposed to do that. We had our orders. I was going to be a medic and go to Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, and the Cuban Missile Crisis hit. And they came in and said, "We're redlining all the orders, and you're all going to be air policemen." And I said, "Well, that's okay with me. Where do I get shipped to?" And he looked out the window and he said, "You can see the top of the building right down there." So I got stuck in San Antonio for another 10 or 11 weeks. I was pulling, I said, "Well, this isn't so bad. We'll go from basic to tech school." And he said, No, not quite. Tech school's all full. We have a couple of weeks you're going to have to wait to go to tech school. And I said, "Well, this is great. We'll just sit around the barracks, maybe do a little cleaning." And they had a thing called PATS. And I said, "PATS, now that's what, sir?" And he said, "That's personnel awaiting tech school." And I said, "Well, that's not too bad." And he says, "You report to the kitchen tomorrow morning at 3:30 a.m. And it was KP is what it was. And we worked KP for 2.5 weeks, 3:30 in the morning till, we didn't get out of there till 8 or 8:30 at night. And then you were so tired you just fell on your bunk and woke back up, and every day. But that was okay, because we got to go to tech school, and we learned everything, and I was pulling barracks guard duty one night. We had two doors, one in the front, one in the back, and I was on the back door, and you had to, like a 4-hour shift, I think it was, and I was standing there, and the doorknob rattled, and I looked out the little window, and I saw it was one of the TIs, one of the younger ones, and I said, halt, who goes there, the whole thing. And he said, open the door. And I said, sir, I'm sorry, sir, do you have a pass? And he started shaking that door, and I said, sir, I can see your identification, sir, and he wouldn't pull his wallet out, he wouldn't do anything, and so I said, I can't let you in, sir, I'm sorry. And he told me that I was going to go back to Pat's. He said, what did they call it? He was going to recycle me until I got my head right. And I said, I'm sorry, sir. And he'd been at the NCO club for a little bit that night. And I was scared to death. And I got off shift and went to bed. And I was going to call my dad and tell him that I had to go back through all this training all over again. But the next morning, nobody said anything to me. So maybe I'm sure he was just teasing me. But we went to tech school, and we went through an obstacle course. Now, people in business today have confidence courses and retreats that they go through, and they take everybody and the station went through it. The television station took all the salespeople and took them to a confidence camp or whatever the heck it was. And they get to eat lunch together, and then they got to take a walk and go through a little climbing thing and help push each other up over this deal. And they said, that breeds confidence and camaraderie, And I said, confidence? I said, I'll tell you a confidence course. I said, there was a rope hanging over this pit. It was about 30 feet wide, and it was muddy water about 12 feet deep. And I said, you grabbed the rope, and you swung over and jumped off on the other side. And if you fell in the water, the rope stopped. And I stood there, and I said, you had brand new pressed fatigues on, and I'm standing there, and the rope's standing still right out in the middle of this pool. And the sergeant looked at me, and he says, that's your rope, son. So I swam out through this mud and grabbed the rope and swam to the other side and threw it back to the next guy. Now that breeds camaraderie. We got our orders out of tech school. I put in for, you had your choice of 3 bases. So I said, let's see. I'll go to Glenview Naval Air Station. That's right by Evanston. I'll get to see the folks on the weekends. And then what else? Let's see. Maybe someplace out in California. I've never been there. And they shipped 123 of us to Wheelus Air Force Base, Tripoli, Libya. I remember getting on this TWA Constellation and flying to Bermuda and then the Azores, refueling in the Azores, and I looked out. I was 18, just turned 18. I looked out the window, and there were armed guards all around the airport. We couldn't get off the plane. 27 hours on this plane with babies and more babies and families, and the smell on that plane. 27 hours. We got to Wheelus Air Force Base, and I am in North Africa, and you can't call home. You can't go home. I got off the plane. Remember we had 505s back then? Those beige things that wrinkled. If you looked at them, they wrinkled. 27 hours on that plane. I got off that plane. I'm standing there, and here's all these guys who were with me in tech school the month before. They graduated the month before I did and were shipped over to Wheelus. And they're all standing down there with big smiles on their faces, and some of them are just sharp troops working base police, and a few of them over here in fatigues. And they said, come on, Webbs, come on down. Welcome to Wheelus, And I said, and it was so hot. It's right on the edge of the Sahara Desert in North Africa. And I walked down and I looked at the troops over here on the base police, and I looked at the guys in the fatigues, and I said, don't you guys polish your shoes? And they said, sure we do, but it melts off. It melts off. So they said, don't go base police. That's day work. You want canine. Canine's night work when it's cool. It's only 95 or 100. This is what you want, Dave. And I looked at their boots, and I looked at them, and they all had these big smiles on their faces, and all the base policemen were over there. And I said, you may be right. So I took canine, and I got a dog. I got the Chief Master Sergeant's dog. He was a command dog. He would lay around the office of the canine organization over there, and I said, this is my dog. This is like my dad's dog. I said, what's his name, Sarge? He says, I said, why not? Because he doesn't like you to say his name. I said, what kind of dog is this? Beautiful German Shepherd. And he says, do you want this dog? And he says, we don't have any other dogs. You're going to have to go up to Wiesbaden and get a dog if you don't. I said, no, this dog's fine. I like this dog. And he was just laying there looking up at me. And so he says, well, you're going to have to get to know him. So I sat on a butt can for a month outside the kennel of this dog, looking at him, talking to him, washing his kennel out in the morning, putting his food in, and he'd just sit there and look at me. And finally, Sergeant, I can't remember his name, came up and put the muzzle on him, put the choke chain on him and the leash, and says, here's your dog. So I took him and I said, now I got a dog now. I walked out in the training yard and I said, Drix, how you doing? And this dog jumped on me. I thought he was going to kill me. And so I got him down and I choked him, I gave him a pop on the choke chain, and I told him to sit real loud, out and real loud, and all stuff I'd been trained to do. And he sat down, he just sat there looking at me, and I looked over at the sergeant, he's doubled over laughing. And I said, what do I do now? I said, what do I do, Sarge? And I put my hand up by my hat like this, and this dog jumped all over me again. And it was a big joke for the chief. He got a big kick out of it. But eventually the dog learned to know me and like me, and we formed a bond that I don't think you can form with any other living thing besides a air policeman and a security dog. It was just, I remember nights we'd be out in the bomb dump. We call it the bomb dump munitions area. And 26 miles away from the base, out in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And we're standing there looking, reading. We could read a book with the stars. Didn't need a moon. It was just, the Milky Way was just one big white swipe across the sky. And we're standing, there's not a sound. And Drix goes, and I go, what was that? And I look, and 26 miles away, you could see the lights of the pickup truck at the east gate swing around onto the road that came out to the bomb dump with coffee. For a year and a half, we were over there, and it was an amazing experience. We were able to drive out into the Sahara Desert and see in 1962, there were still remnants of the Second World War, Rommel and the gun emplacements, and it was just so interesting. I wish I hadn't been 18. I wish I'd been, 50, so I could really appreciate everything that was over there. But I was 18, making $31 a month, and I couldn't afford anything. So when I had a real nice flight sergeant named McCarthy, a very religious man. He started me, as soon as I got there, we started going to church with him and his family. And I was so homesick, and God bless him, he got me through those bad first couple of months, and we became good friends. And I was an interesting troop. I didn't quite take it as seriously as everybody else did. I like to think I went in a goofy boy, and I came out a man, still pretty goofy. But we shipped back. We all got our orders to come back, and I wanted to go to Chanute. That was this girl that I was dating in high school. She was in high school over there, and I was dating her, and I wanted to go to Chanute with her dad. He was a master sergeant. So I put in for Chanute and Great Lakes Naval Air Station and someplace in California. And the orders all came through, and my sergeant was standing there, and he says, Weber? He says, he started laughing, and I said, Sarge, what's the matter? He says, you're going to be in jail in 72 hours. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're going to Offutt Air Force Base. I said, I don't even know Offutt Air Force. What is that? That's Strategic Air Command. You know them big bombers that come down here? Oh, yeah. So I came to Offutt, and I was up in the training room being circumcised, we called it. That's where they, excuse me, ladies, I didn't mean to offend you. That's where they dislearn everything you've ever learned before about security and relearn you in SAC's way of doing things. And I was there about 3 days, and Captain Swing was our commander. He's not here, is he? I was speaking out at Highland Country Club one year, about 7, 8 years ago, at a golf thing, and I was telling a story about Offutt because there was a bunch of officers there, and this voice from the back said, "You better shut up right now, Airman." I said, "Who?" And now Colonel Swing stood up, and I said, "Oh my God!" So I couldn't tell any of the funny stories. So I just thought I'd ask. Anyway, I was sitting at the table with all these airman basics who'd just gotten out of basic training in tech school and maybe had one stripe, and I'd been in 2 years. And Captain Swing comes in the room, and I called the room to attention and said, "Captain Swing, how are you, sir?" And he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Weber, sir, Airman." I think I might have been Airman second class. I think I got my stripe just before I came back. "Airman second class Weber, sir." He says, "Well, you're a pretty sharp troop." I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Come up to my office tomorrow or next day or whatever." So I came up, and he asked me if I'd like to go on the elite guard. He checked my records out, and he said I was the kind of guy that the elite guard was looking for. And so I got on the elite guard, and I've never been so proud of anything in my entire life as to put that beret on. And I spoke out at Offutt a few years ago, and they gave me the pistol grips we used to carry with the little 38, the little chrome-plated 38s. I got a set of the pistol grips, and they gave me a block from D building where we used to march, all varnished and polished. I said, "Shit, I polished it. What do you mean, walking across that thing?" We marched out there for 2 years every day, 4 or 5 hours. And they gave me that, and to be on the elite guard. And then I remember standing up by the front desk there, by the ADT, and watching a guy named Dave Scotty, and a guy named Freddie Winters work the front door. And I said to myself, these guys are the most amazing people I have ever seen in my entire life. They know everybody, where they were. And I remember working the JSTPS entrance down in the basement, right next to Command Center. And Admiral Stroh was the JSTPS commander. And we had K rations and stacked up along the walls so that it was a fairly narrow hallway. And I'd be sitting on the post. Nobody ever came by unless they worked in JSTPS. And Admiral Stroh would come out, and I'd hear the door open, and then he'd hide on the edge of the K rations until I sat back down. And then he'd just to see me jump up and, come to attention when he walked by. God, he must have done that 50 times to me. I remember there was a bag of trash on the post when I got there, just a regular bag of garbage, papers and stuff. And I called up the ADT, and I reported a bag of trash on the post when I took the post. And Admiral Stroh came marching out and looked around and yelled at me and said, "What is this?" And I said, "Sir, I'm going to take care of it." "I'll take care of it, don't you worry about it." So he goes back. Next comes a colonel, and he goes back, and a major, he goes back, and a lieutenant, and he goes back. And a sergeant and an airman third class comes back out and picks up that bag of trash and takes it back into the JSTPS office. I remember working the command post one night, and this was the big post going into the command center, and I felt such a wonderful feeling of pride that they would, someone would think enough of you to put you on a post like that. And I remember the flight crew came down, like they did every night, and it was about 11 o'clock, and the two captains came up to me and stood in front of me, and I took their badge, and it was Captain Crook, and I said, "Captain Crook?" "Yes, sir." "Go ahead, sir." "Captain Outlaw." I checked his badge and looked at it, and I said, "Yes, sir, go ahead." Captain Crook and Captain Outlaw, and I'm sitting there thinking, is this a penetration? So I was going to push the button, but I didn't. And I sat there about another 5 minutes, and Major Sheriff walks up to me. And I reached under that desk, and I'm pushing that button like crazy. And here comes the alert team down, and they said, what's going on? I said, you're not going to believe this, but Captain Crook and Captain Outlaw just went through there, and Captain Sheriff came down after him. Major Sheriff. But it turned out to be that was their names. It wasn't. That's the truth. But that one, Sergeant Schumacher was in charge of the elite guard up there. And boy, he was a wonderful NCO to work for. Tough guy, golly. And all the guys that were up there, we had such a great time. And I don't mean a great time that we had a lot of fun, but it's wonderful when an organization is well run and disciplined and people know what they're supposed to do and they do it. And people all over the country look at that organization and look at the elite guard as the model for security. And I was on post one day, and a guy named Sergeant Al Woolgar. Does anybody remember Sergeant Woolgar? Do you? Sergeant Woolgar came up, and he had the biggest beret I had ever seen. It looked big because he was kind of a smallish guy. It was just the same size, but it seemed to be bigger, and it seemed like almost it was like French. You know, he had it down over the side of his face, and he was sharp, and he was looking good, and he came up, and he said, he had this little way of talking, Airman Weber here. And I said, yes, Sergeant, can I help you? And he looked me up and down, he says, we've been recommended to join the drill team by Airman Stahoviak, your roommate. And I said, Sarge, and he says, can you walk? I said, yes, sir, I can walk. And he says, have you ever handled a weapon? I said, yes, sir, I know how to handle a weapon. Well, come on up to D building Friday at 3 o'clock and we'll see what you got. And he spun around and, you know, I mean, did an about face on me. And he walks out of the building. I go, what the heck is going on? So I go back to the barracks and say, Charlie, what do you got me into here? And he says, you're going to love it. He says, you know, this post stuff is fine up the elite guard, but the drill team, you're going to love the drill team. So I tried out for the drill team, and I got on the drill team. And it was about 24, 25 guys, and it was the SAC elite guard drill team. And we've traveled all over the country, marched in parades, did demonstrations, marched at Memorial Day, Armed Forces Day, you name it. We traveled all over the country, thousands of miles, flying in those old C-97s and marching. And we went to Washington, D.C. for Armed Forces Day one year to march in the parade. And I'm telling you, we kicked, no offense, ma'am, we kicked the other services' butts. We had 1903 Springfields chrome-plated with bayonets, and we all had hand-picked stocks. You got to pick 3 stocks, and then you sat and started refinishing them until they looked like glass. And this guy and I were arguing over this one stock. It was just beautiful. It had kind of a bird's eye walnut kind of just gorgeous stock for the gun. And he took it away from me because he had more time and grade than me. So he got his pick, and he took the one I wanted and worked on that thing for a month. And the first time he tapped it on a 9 count, that stock split right up the middle. But we got to make our own rifle, basically, our own drill rifle. And we went to out the Air Force Academy as a demonstration unit for the collegiate drill competitions for the there was about 12 colleges there, and they all sent their ROTC teams. And they said, and now from Offutt Air Force Base, a demonstration unit, the SAC Elite Guard drill team. And all these other drill teams were doing all this kind of college stuff, you know. We came in there at at a fairly slow count with every heel hitting at the same time. When we did a 9 count, those rifles tapped on that gym floor. Sounded like a gun going off. And we did all of our stuff and exchange arms, and God, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now. Whatever you do, somebody told me once, do it as best you can, and you'll never regret it. And by God, we were a good marching unit. We had a kid, I got a new roommate named Tom Nichols, and he was on for about 6 weeks just learning the routine, and one of the guys fell out of a drill performance with heat stroke. And I don't even remember where it was. Maybe it was in Chicago. So they threw Tom in the file. He was second man in the 3rd rank. Right next to me, I was second man in the 2nd rank. And I talked him through the drill by counting off his count and marching at my count, which was totally different. And then I'd tell him what movement was coming up and start counting it off for him. And we did that drill. It went perfect. And I just kind of talking under my breath like this, 2, 3, 4, go, get ready, left turn coming up, whatever it was. And we got through it, and we're all done, and he looked at me, and Woolgar, tough little Sergeant Woolgar, come up to me, and shoot, I swore I saw a little tear in his eye. And he didn't say anything, he just like that, and then he kind of turned away and walked away. Well, they had a surprise inspection at the barracks one day, and the drill team, although we were the elite guard too, and we had to work sometimes up on the hill, we didn't have the best rooms in the entire barracks. So Sergeant, I think his name was Fondy, Sergeant Fondy, our barracks chief, gave us a couple of demerits. Well, Woolgar saw this. And they had another sergeant named Rock, Staff Sergeant Rock. And I'd read all the comic books. I really thought he was Sergeant Rock out of the comic books. And he said, Woolgar sent us a message that we had a formal inspection Saturday morning at 8 a.m. So we had to be in our dress blues, standing by our bunks. We cleaned all week, cleaned our room. And we're standing there in our dress blues and tap at the door. And I open the door, go back to attention. Here comes Woolgar, wearing a uniform I had never seen in my life before. It was the fanciest dress uniform I had ever seen. And him and Rock had his clipboard. And he's right behind him like this. And Woolgar walks in the room. I wish I could tell you what he looked like coming in the room. He looked like some admiral from Italy or something. It was all regulation stuff, but he just was able to put on a show like you can't believe. God, I wish I could see him again. He walked in the room. And we're standing there, just scared to death, but still trying not to laugh at the same time. And he walks over, looks under the bed, does all the little stuff. Then he walks over to the rope that did the blinds. And he had white gloves on, of course, and he goes like this on the rope, about an inch. And he comes over to Sergeant Rock and he says, Sergeant Rock, let us leave these premises before we too are contaminated by this filth. And he turns around and walks out of the room and closes the door slams the door behind him. And Charlie and I I said, we're going to get Article 15s. We're gone. We're completely out of here. And we never heard another thing from it. It was just his little way of doing things. If you messed up in a parade or a drill performance, you had to carry the box. And that doesn't sound too bad until you figure that it's 36 rifles in a coffin kind of thing, about 8 feet long, and 2 guys had to carry the box on each trip. And one of our duties was covering funerals. On the drill team, we had to shoot the rounds off at the funerals. And I remember in 1964, early 64, late 63, I remember the World War I veterans who were on the American Legion here in Omaha. And once in a while they'd pass away, and I'd start to think about World War I. These guys fought in Europe in World War I. And then some World War II veterans would pass away, and we'd stand their funerals. And I remember toward the end, in '66, a lot of kids from Vietnam were coming back, and we stood their funerals. And the families were so young, and you couldn't help but say to yourself at some point in time, what am I doing here? You know, and those guys are gone. They gave all they could. They gave all they had. And through a stroke of luck, whatever, here I am standing here shooting off an M1, saluting them for giving up their life for this country. It just never seemed right to me. I never could put it all together. But the years I spent in the service, I say this, I didn't say this then, sometimes, but I say it now. They were the most important years of my life. They taught me things that I will remember all of my life. It didn't take my sense of humor away. In fact, Woolgar started calling me Gomer for the last year of the time I was in on the drill team, because we were able to do things that were just kind of unbelievable. And one time a troop fell out with heat stroke, and I was on standby. We always took 2 or 3 extra guys, and I was on standby, and he said, is there anybody on the parade route in the crowd here that can march? And I raised my hand, and he said, surprise, surprise, and I ran out and grabbed the rifle, and we finished the drill. So he called me Gomer ever since then. But the Air Force gave me a basis for my life, that you only get out of life what you put in, and the harder you work at what you do, the more successful you will be. And with all of that, never lose your sense of humor. And I go to work, and for 40 years later, I walk in and my shoes are polished, and everybody says, did you get a new pair of shoes? I said, no, they're just polished. Oh. And I was shaving this morning, and I said to myself, what do you think I said to myself? I looked in the mirror, I said, damn, I should have got a haircut. I should have got a haircut. If that's not, caring about how you look and caring about your job and whether you do it right or not, if that's not a lesson that you learn in the service, I don't know what is. But in conclusion, I brought my water up. I've never proposed a toast before, but I want to toast the Elite Guard, the Strategic Air Command, the United States Air Force, the United States of America, and all of you people who have done so much all of your lives to make this country the great country that it is. Thank you, and God bless you.